Hey guys, wanted to go ahead and just do an overview of the Topping CL101 microphone. This microphone is actually just recently came out about a month ago. I noticed that like if you go on YouTube and you type in Topping CL101, a lot of the people will say sponsored, sponsored, sponsored. So they were given this microphone for free, but just want to let you know I am not sponsored, so I can be as honest as I want about this microphone. But yeah, this is how it sounds. Microphone check, testing 1, 2, 3. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a passage, and then right after that, what will happen is all the other microphones will have a passage. Now, to save me time, what I used to do was I would have one microphone play, then I would come back here, and I would keep going back and forth, back and forth. I'm not going to do that anymore. That just takes too much time. What I'm going to do is I'll go 5 at a time. It'll be 5 microphones, and then it'll come back to this, 5 microphones, and come back to this, just to save me time, okay? All right, so let's get right to it. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turns on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. All right, so this is the PROAR 414. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so this is the Neat Worker B2. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Alright, so this is the MXL 990. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. This is the MXL 770. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, so we're back on the Topping CL101. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so this is the Mackie EM91C. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so this is audio from the Audio-Technica AT2020. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so this is the Audio-Technica AT2035. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so we're back on the CL101. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so this is the PROAR Fangdong. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. This is the Rode NT1A. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. This is the Rode NT1 5th Gen, or Rode NT1 Signature. They're both the same. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. This is the Rode NT1 4th Gen. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so we're back in the Topping CL101. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so this is the 512 Skylight. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so this is the Baby Blue bottle. Now, right now it's around $300 or so, but sometimes you can find this for about $150, which is around the price of the CL101 if you're patient. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turns on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so here's the Blue Ember, and this is how it sounds. I'm noticing there's a little bit of a hum, so something might be wrong with my microphone, but anyway. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. Alright, so we're back on the Topping CL101. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. Alright, so we're back in the Topping CL101, but I want to go ahead and do a comparison a little bit more thorough compared to the MXL 770. Basically, just to see, okay? So, The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect, so the video will repeat. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect, so the video will repeat. Alright, so we're right back on the topping CL101, but now I'm going to do a more thorough shootout with the MXL 990. So the video will repeat itself. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. So that's the 990. The small pup gnawed a hole in the sock. The fish twisted and turned on the bent hook. Press the pants and sew a button on the vest. The swan dive was far short of perfect. So that's the 990. That's the CL101. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to give you my final thoughts regarding this microphone and to go from there. I usually don't like to do this. I usually like to have people come up with their own conclusions, but I've been getting a lot of comments saying like, hey, just give us your thoughts. What do you think? Right? So I'll give you my thoughts and I'll give you my comparisons on each of these microphones and give you my 2 cents. So first off, what I want to say is this microphone, when I was actually hearing this microphone, it sounds V-shaped to me. Right? So it has definitely more low ends compared to some of the microphones I've seen, but it also has shimmer to it. So I wouldn't say this is a bright microphone per se. I wouldn't say this is like a dark microphone, and I wouldn't say this is a neutral microphone. And they kind of say it's a neutral microphone, but to me, it sounds more V-shaped. Okay, let's go bottom of the line and all the way up in my comparison. So this is the Skylight. $49. This microphone sounds worse all across the board. This just lacks detail. It sounds lispy. So between these two, I would say this is a clear winner, right? So there's that. The newer 700, I wasn't able to showcase this. This is broken. It doesn't work, but obviously, clearly, this beats this microphone in my opinion. This is just a piece of crap. I would say, okay, Rode NT1A. This one had a little bit more sharpness and more sibilance, and kind of like a little bit more. It's just being a Rode NT1A. So I would actually say this microphone sounds better than the Rode NT1A. This is the MXL 770. Now the reason I did the shootout again was because they sounded really similar at first. But as I listen to it more, it has like a lot of the characteristics of the 770, but it seems to be more refined. Or maybe even maybe it's a modded version of the 770. I can't tell. And maybe I have to do more shootouts, but when I actually went back and listened, there were times where I thought they sounded the same. Now, I do want to make one thing clear. They're not in shape at all the same size. Like, this is actually much larger, but I just felt like there were a lot of similarities with the 770. So, but I would definitely say that this sounds better than the 770. Is not just subjectively, it just mean in general, like it just has a more all across the board, it just sounds better than the MXL 770. So there's that. Okay, next microphone I want to talk about the MXL 990. The 990 sounds much more brighter and harsher by comparison. So this sounds better than the 990. And at no point did I think they sounded the same. This sounded more closer to the 770 to me. Okay. The AT2020, which is $100, this sounds better than the AT2020. And I actually think this sounds better than the AT2035 at that same price point. So we'll just knock this out and knock this out. Now, the funny thing is, the Mackie EM91C, which is $49, I have a difficult time kind of going over this microphone because I love the way it sounds, but there are some major limitations of this microphone. Now, this microphone is $49. To me, when I was actually listening to them side by side, I actually think the Mackie EM91C sounds better. It sounds more smooth, but the problem with this microphone is that it's very noisy, and it also has a false SPL. In other words, it will just, like, what they say is the SPL. It's not true. It's actually much lower. So you will actually distort your audio when you get too loud on this. So it's hard for me to recommend this, but this microphone's a fantastic microphone if it is something where you're doing long form narration and you're not getting too loud, right? So that's my 2 cents regarding that. Regarding compared to the NT1 5th Gen, it's crazy because the more and more I listen to the NT1 5th Gen, the more and more I actually am convinced it's so much closer to the NT1A, which isn't a good thing. And it's kind of interesting because as time goes on, like, we're in Discords where there's voice actors and they all like have the NT1 signature, and I'm just like, it doesn't sound good on many people. Like, I'm just like, it doesn't sound good all across the board, and I'm almost convinced this is pretty much just like an NT1A. And okay, regarding the Blue Ember, and I would say I actually like the sound of the Blue Ember compared to this. But the Blue Ember is $49, but I have difficulty blind buying recommendation the Blue Ember because look at the size of this. That doesn't go with many shock mounts, right? So it makes it a difficult kind of recommendation. Also, my microphone of the Blue Ember is already having a hum in it. So it's kind of like there's definitely some quality control issues. But the problem is Blue is they're out of business. Logitech is also like, just like, well, we're not, so that you're kind of SOL, but at the same time, it's a $49 microphone. And I actually think this sounds better than this microphone. So as you can see, I'm not just saying this is better than everything, or I'm not saying it's worse than everything. I'm clearly going over strengths and weaknesses, right? So there's that. The next microphone I want to go over is the Neatworker B2. Dude, the Neatworker B2 blows this microphone away. In fact, the Neatworker B2, in my opinion, as I've actually kind of studied it more, blows away all of these microphones. It is an amazing deal at $69 is one of my 2 cents regarding that. Regarding the NT1 4th Gen, I do truly think this sounds better than the NT1 5th Gen. This sounds better than the NT1A. But I actually think sonically, I would say these are on par, actually, which is kind of shocking. When I went back and I listened, at no point was like, oh, NT1 wins. No. It wasn't like that. At no point did I go, oh, this one wins. It was actually a point where I was like, dude, they're on par. So I would say this is on par sonically with the NT1 4th Gen. Again, all I'm saying right now is very subjective. You go at it with your own pace. Again, this is why I avoid doing this, but people are asking me to give my final thoughts. So there's that. This is the baby blue bottle. So there's a couple things I want to say here. Well, I want to say 3 things, which is important. Number 1 is obviously, go ahead and take a look around because you can find this for around $169. When you hear this microphone by itself, it sounds amazing, but there is a distortion effect. I mean, not distortion. There's like this illusion effect with sound. If you keep listening to high-pitched microphones, like all these motherfucking cheap microphones, and then you come here, then this sounds woolly and it sounds bad. But then when you hear it by itself, separate from all these other things, this sounds amazing. And so what I want to just say is you have to almost kind of like, you know how people when they're using colognes, they have to sniff like coffee beans to kind of get just the point I'm trying to say is like when you hear this after you hear a bunch of bright microphones, you're going to think, oh, this sounds bad. But it's not. It's because your mind is playing tricks with you. But when you actually give it some time and you come back and you listen to it again, it sounds amazing. This is a great microphone. The other thing I want to say too, which is a little bit controversial, a long time ago, I used to think that the general original baby blue bottle original without the SL version was better. I actually now think that the SL version is actually better because it gives you the option to choose the high pass filter on it. And I actually do genuinely believe that you're going to get better sound with that high pass filter on there because sometimes it can be a little bit too woolly by itself. That last microphone I want to talk about is the Fangdong and obviously the other one, the 414. Those sounded really good. And I would say at no point did I think like this destroyed those. I would say they were on par. So this, which is around $69 and the other one, which is around $49 or so, they were on par. So those are my 2 cents of everything here and we'll go from there.